Hello, and welcome to the Christian Habits Podcast. This is the podcast that will help you break free from your strongholds, draw closer to God, and develop habits that will help you love God and others better. And now, here's your host, Barb Raveling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have all of you here today. I'm excited about today's interview. I have Christy Osborne on the podcast, and Christy is the author of the book Love Life Sober. That's what we're going to be discussing today. She's a graduate of the University of Southern California, attended law school at Pepperdine University, and after passing the California bar exam, Christy relocated to London and assumed various roles in law, public relationships, and business development. She founded a popular website for American expat women and became a royal commentator on Sky News in the UK. That sounds interesting. Christy discovered her true calling when she chose sobriety and began openly advocating for it on social media. As a highly trained senior sobriety coach featured in Marie Claire, Newsweek, The Daily Mail, Yahoo, PBS, London Daily News, Hip and Healthy, Boy, a Million Sources, more, she empowers women throughout the U.S. and U.K. to redefine their relationship with alcohol. So welcome to the podcast, Christy.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good to have you. And I have to say right from the beginning, I absolutely love your book, Love Life Sober. It's at 40 days, right? There's 40 daily readings. And they're not little fluff readings. Each reading has so much so many insights and encouragement, and it's just a super helpful book. I think helpful if you have a problem with too much alcohol, or even if you can apply it to too much sugar or something like that. So it's just a really practical book.
Oh, thank you.
Well, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your journey with alcohol? One of the things I love in the book is how vulnerable you were in sharing everything.
Yeah, of course. So, I grew up in LA. I first tried alcohol as a teen, thought it was disgusting. Then went on to college, was in a sorority, drank, but never got too out of control. I didn't like the feeling of being out of control, and I didn't like the feeling of being unsafe. So it kept pretty measured, through college and everything like that. And then as I got older, I started using alcohol for different reasons. I like to talk in the book about how I gave alcohol different jobs. And when I started law school, it was one of those things that I used as a way to decompress and relax after a long day of studying and classes. I also met my now husband in law school. And so it was like wine and like learning about wine. We became wine snobs. Like we just loved learning about wine. It was a big part of our like romance and everything like that. So it became this like way to connect. And then we moved over to the UK after law school. And it was definitely, again, like used for connection and meeting people and for the whole social aspect. And I live in the UK and I know I coach women and everybody always loves to tell me that their city is the booziest city in the whole world. But London is definitely one of them. And so, you do everything at the pub, everything. You study, you meet people. So there was this drinking to kind of get to know people as an expat. And then I became a mom, and the wine and the alcohol was as the reward for being a mom of little kids in a foreign country with no family here. And so it just took on these different roles. I was giving it different jobs like throughout my life. And my mom passed away in 2018. And with that came a ton of grief and really like complicated layered grief. Because we were very, very close, but we had a really complicated relationship. And she actually started drinking when I was in my 20s. And so it completely altered our relationship because it changed her personality. And so she ended up really struggling with it to the point of passing away. And so I was really angry with her because I saw it as she made this choice to drink instead of be around for me and my kids and our family. And so I was angry, but I was also really sad. And so, of course, instead of like dealing with those emotions in a healthy way and finding some good coping mechanisms, I went to wine and I drank. And so that looked like drinking, at home, a few glasses of wine after the kids had gone to bed. And then lots of cocktails out on a girls' night out in town. And so it took on various like forms. But the interesting thing is it didn't really look different to anybody around me. Everywhere I looked on social media, moms were decompressing with wine after a long day with the kids. When I was on a night out, it was like, let your hair down and relax, and have fun. And so it was really confusing to me because deep down, I knew that I wasn't living like the woman that I wanted to be, but it didn't really look different. And so it just got to a point where I was worn out. And so this is what I think is so important is you don't have to have this massive rock bottom moment, right? I didn't have a DUI, I didn't get arrested. My marriage was not in a great place because we were fighting all the time because we were having silly arguments that were like booze infused, but nothing major happened. I just was worn out and I was tired and I wasn't the mom I wanted to be. I wasn't the wife I wanted to be. And I just woke up one morning and it happened to be on the anniversary of my mom's death 2 years on. And we had been out the night before and I was hungover and I just looked in the bathroom mirror and I said, Jesus, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to feel like this. And so that just little piece of not little, massive piece of surrender led me on this journey of just exploring what I felt like when I removed alcohol from my life. I didn't put a number on it. I didn't put a 30-day thing on it. I didn't put 100 days on it. I didn't do anything like that. I just wanted to see if I felt better. And day by day, I did. I started feeling so much better. I started sleeping so much better, like incredibly. And I then, for about 3 months, I started documenting all of this kind of on my Instagram page. And I was getting so many questions. And this was at the beginning of COVID. So of course, everybody was locked down and looking at their phones all day long. And so people were really curious about why I was doing this. And did I really have a problem? And, even good girlfriends that had been out with me a lot, I didn't know you were struggling. Nobody kind of knew. And so they were really surprised. But in being really open kind of with my journey, I started to help people. And then other people decided that they were going to maybe try, a few weeks off or whatever. But I just ended up becoming really intrigued by the neuroscience of what alcohol does to our brains and our bodies and the effects that it has on cortisol, for example, making us more anxious and all of these things. And I just landed at this place where I was like, oh, all of the reasons I was drinking, all of those jobs that I was giving alcohol for coping or for connection or for stress relief or to rest, it was actually doing the opposite of that thing. And it was the combination of learning about it, learning the science behind it, but also feeling the difference of what it felt like to remove alcohol from my life. I was like, oh, I don't want to feel like that anymore. I'm going to keep going. And so then I became a coach and had the privilege of coaching women in the US and the UK and running various groups and all this stuff. And so it's been a wild and amazing ride. I never in a million years thought I'd be doing this.
Yeah. Well, you said so many great things in that. And one of the things you talked about is kind of approaching it as an experiment. And even in the book, you talk about doing a 40-day fast from alcohol, but just so it's not like you're getting rid of it for sure, but you're just giving it a try. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what's the value of having that experiment approach?
Yeah, so much. And I mean, I call this like a no-fail plan because even if you're reading the book and you're doing the little exercises that I give you and you learn something, then this is a win and you're going to gain value from it. And that means even if you have a drink on day 5, because you're going to begin to be in tune with how alcohol is truly making you feel, which is something that I had never asked myself before I went on my own kind of experiment. And so I think the experimental mindset is so good because first of all, you're taking forever off the table. When we think, first of all, it's very hard for our human brains to grasp what forever is. But when we're constantly future tripping over that wedding I have, or that 40th birthday I have, or whatever it is coming up, it can lead you to stay stuck. And so this is literally about how does it feel to remove alcohol? What does it feel like when you do drink, if you remember that? And so it's just a way of taking the pressure off. I think because there's also so much stigma when it comes to, and within the church as well, when addressing an alcohol problem, especially as women, there's a lot of stigma attached, right? It means you have to use labels. It means you have to start counting days. It means you have to go to meetings for the rest of your life. To a lot of people, and absolutely no shade to AA. It's helped so many people, but that wasn't something. I was never going to walk into an AA meeting because I didn't feel like my drinking was bad enough. And I just couldn't resonate with this idea of I had zero power and I was going to be diseased for the rest of my life. And as a Christian, my power is in Christ, and his power is made perfect in my weakness. And when I started this journey, I felt so much stronger. So anyways, I went on a tangent there, but yeah, experimental mindset is definitely key.
Right. I remember in the book you said, I knew what it felt like to drink, but I didn't remember what it felt like not to drink. Right. So you're just trying it out and seeing what it's like. Now, I think you still come to the conclusion that you just don't drink at all now, right? Or do you still have the occasional drink, or do you not drink at all?
No, I don't have. And this is the amazing thing that I never thought was actually possible, is I don't have the desire. I really, truly don't. Because if I ask myself the question of why would I want that drink, none of the reasons are true for me anymore. It doesn't relax me. It doesn't make me more fun. It doesn't make me a better mom. It doesn't do all these things that I thought it was helping me do. And that was learned by going on an experiment and getting really curious and giving myself so much grace to learn and figure out if this substance, which is a really highly addictive substance that the world tells us we need for every occasion, was really serving me or not, or if it was taking from me.
Right. And you also talk about the willpower trap, lesson 10 in the book, or day 10, whatever you call it. I love that one. That was on willpower and how you can't, this is different than just muscling through it and using self-control. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. And this is why, we talked about before we hit record, right? Emotional eating. It's kind of when you're talking about diets and eating, this is why diets don't work, is when you have to fully lean into your own willpower. Because what happens with food and alcohol, let's just talk about alcohol. We have a laundry list of jobs, benefits, all these things, all these stories that we've told ourselves about how alcohol benefits us in our subconscious. And that has been these neural pathways that are giving us all this information has been in our mind for decades and decades. And so when you come along and say you're not going to drink, you're trying to override all of this data in your subconscious telling you that it's a positive thing, that it helps you. And so instead of leaning into willpower, which I always compare to the dying battery on your phone, at the end of the day, it's dead, right? This is why at 5 o'clock, all your 9 a.m. good intentions go out the window, is because you've made 1,000,001 decisions by that point and you're exhausted. And it's easier to hit the easy button than try to override all of this subconscious data that's telling you that alcohol is the thing that's going to relax you or connect you or whatever it is. And so, yeah, it's so incredible that when you really look at all of the messaging that we've received and all these things, these beliefs and stories we've made up, that they are the ones that are basically calling the shots. And so this is why, as Christians, right, we get to pull all of our thoughts into the forefront, run them against truth, renew our mind. The battlefield's going on up here, And so, yeah.
Right. And you say in the book, change your thinking, change your drinking.
Yeah.
That's a snappy little phrase, but I think change your thinking and change your desires. That changes your desires when we change our thinking, and that'll change our actions. So one of the things you said, and most people who are listening to this, anybody who has a drink, you said it's not relaxing. Most people would say, of course it's relaxing. So why don't you just give us that as an example? What would the complete truth be to wine is relaxing?
Yeah. So wine gives you a 30-minute, and this is all proven, a 30-minute dopamine spike. And that also is the feeling where you get a euphoria and your shoulders come out of your ears and you're like, this is a really relaxing experience. But what we don't look at is minute 31 and beyond, right? And then what's happening in our brains is that because God created them so incredibly, when we have this massive artificial douse of dopamine in the form of a glass of wine, our brains need us to come back to homeostasis. And so they release a counteracting chemical called dynorphin, which brings us back down to like even. And that 30 minutes of euphoria cannot be replicated again. But we chase that in another glass of wine. But because our body is so desperate to get us to feel more balanced, we have all these other chemicals coming in to bring us back to baseline. And so it's really, really hard to replicate that 30 minutes of relaxation. It doesn't last. And then what you have on top of that is you have an adrenaline and a cortisol spike, which usually comes around 3 a.m. That's why you wake up panicked, wishing you hadn't had so much to drink, because your cortisol is like spiking. And then that cortisol stays elevated for 7 to 10 days after. And so something that you drank to relax is actually making you, first of all, exhausted because you didn't sleep, but actually more stressed out because you have this elevated cortisol. And so then having a drink to relax 5 days later, what you're really doing is managing the withdrawal of the drink you had previously. And so it's this constant hamster wheel of like trying to relax, but actually making yourself more stressed out. And we haven't even talked about then adding coffee in the morning and sugar and so you're just like, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, would one drink cause that effect? Like if you just had one glass of wine, would that cause that effect?
So even one drink elevates cortisol and disrupts your sleep. It's not obviously to the same extent, but I have so many clients that have those Whoop bands. They're like kind of like Fitbits or something, and they track the heart rate and all of that stuff. And they've even said that even one glass of wine, they can see it in their heart patterns and their sleep patterns and all of that. And so obviously it's not to the same extent if you had 3, but you're not de-stressing yourself. You're not relaxing yourself. It feels like you are, but you're actually doing the opposite.
Right. So you might relax yourself for 20, 30 minutes, but overall you're adding more stress to your life.
Right. 100%.
It's so interesting because I've always thought, one drink, having one glass of wine, if you can keep it to that, like I would say my husband and I didn't drink at all till our kids left home. And, we were raised back in the days when it was wrong. It was considered wrong, quote, for Christians to drink, right? In college, it's like, oh, you make people stumble. And I remember thinking at the time, I feel like most Christians don't drink anyway. Having desserts at potlucks make us stumble more because we all struggle with that. But then the kids left for home and my husband and I would have a glass of wine when he came home from work. So the only job I assigned it was transition from work to evening. So I was never tempted to have more than one because I knew if I had more than one, I wouldn't sleep. And so I didn't have a problem with over drinking. But then I listened to a Huberman Lab podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I'll include a link to that. But he talked about how all the negative effects of alcohol, even if you only have one glass. In fact, I think he said if you have maybe 1 to 2 glasses a week, it's not bad. And I don't know, you might disagree with that, but definitely 1 a day. Most people, the common idea is, 1 a day is good for you. People who drink wine in Italy live long and all that. But he said,
all of that has been debunked now. Yeah, all of that stuff, all that good, like wine is good for the heart. They've completely done a 180 on that. It's actually so bad for the heart. And it's, this is the thing. And I hate doing the like scare tactics thing because I think that doesn't lead to us being able to look at this with grace and self-compassion. However, it's a class 1 carcinogen, the same as tobacco. It's directly
Really?
It's directly linked to 7 different types of cancer, and it is directly linked to breast cancer. And this is all new science in the last like 5 years, but 3 drinks a week, according to the World Breast Cancer Federation, or the UK one, increases your risk by 15%.
Wow, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so It's just, and I say this stuff to help us all empower ourselves, because we're also fighting an uphill battle with the messaging that it's relaxing and it's good for a date night and all this other things, right?
Right. And I was interesting because you talked about changing your beliefs in the book, and you referred to the lies that you learned about alcohol from different sources. And one was even the church. I couldn't figure out what that would be. What did you mean by that? What lies would you learn from the church about alcohol?
Well, I think this is so dependent on where you were, like what church you grew up in, and then your surroundings. But like you said, right, you Christians didn't drink, so that was a story that was created for you about alcohol. And for me over here in the UK, for example, there's a lot of alcohol in church functions, and so it's almost like it's permissible. And so it's just it depends, right? But the point is that we end up making beliefs about alcohol based on so many different factors, and that does include the church, whatever that looks like. And so it might be that it's forbidden, it might be that it's permissible. It depends.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, I didn't really understand the mommy wine culture either, because that's not something we had when my kids were little. So what's that about, the mommy wine culture? Or maybe you've already talked about that.
No, so mommy wine culture is just this, it's messaging, and it's very prevalent on social media, but it's also prevalent on Etsy and Target and everywhere you go, where it's this messaging. For example, like my baby wines, WHINE. So I wine, WINE.
Oh.
And it's this whole idea of like mommy needs wine because being a mom is hard. And one of the most prevalent examples of this was during COVID, actually. Tropicana orange juice did a big campaign where the moms were hiding in a closet or a garage or a bathroom drinking mimosas, but like hiding from their children. Mm-hmm. And it was this whole idea of like, in order to survive lockdown, you needed to have alcohol like somewhere away from your kids. And when I saw that, I was just like, this is the opposite of what moms need right now, right? Moms need a break. Moms need rest. Mom needs to probably open up her Bible or go have a nap or have a good meal, but she doesn't need wine. And so I think in the book, I referenced that like Etsy at the time of writing had like almost 70,000 of these like items on baby onesies or tumblers or cocktail napkins. And so the problem that I have with it is it's that sending this message to our children that there's such hard work that we need to drink a really addictive substance in order to deal with them. And being a mom is really hard work. It's the hardest job ever, but drinking doesn't actually help us with that, because it makes us more tired. It makes us less present. It makes us more grumpy, all of the things. And so it's very common on all over social media still. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I remember when the kids were little and, there's all the commotion, noise, you didn't get enough time to yourself. If I had trained myself, and I went to sweets back then, not wine, I didn't ever didn't drink when my kids were little, but if I had gone to God and kind of seen my life through his eyes and seen my kids through his eyes and my role as mother through his eyes, I just would have been so much happier and content and a better mom. So yeah, I can see that. It's just like another coping technique.
Totally.
So whether we go to our phone, we go to sugar, we go to wine, whatever, it's not really helping us mature, not helping us grow, and not helping us be joyful. Other than for 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But it's artificial, right? It's fake.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't last. So you did also talk about how it affects relationships. So how does drinking affect relationships negatively?
Yeah, I mean, I go into in the book about just various relationships of my life that alcohol damaged, but it was very much one of these things where I thought it was like connecting me, for example, over at a dinner table with a bunch of girlfriends. You open up and spill your deep, dark secrets and all this stuff. And you think that you're then somehow connecting, but nobody remembers the conversation the next morning, or you overshared, or you're embarrassed by something you said, because what alcohol does is it turns off your prefrontal cortex. And so you're not making good decisions, right? When you're drinking, we all know that's pretty obvious. And so I also think it hinders you showing up as your authentic self as well as the person that you want to be. And I've talked to and coached a lot of gals that feel like, for example, they have to drink because they're always the hostess or they're always the entertainment and they are the fun girl and all of this stuff. And so it's almost like putting on this persona so that the people that you're trying to connect with don't even get to really know like the true you.
Right.
And so it's actually really hinders connection and it hinders relationships. And I mean, in my own marriage, it was just, you're bickering because you've had a couple too many glasses of wine and you're just arguing over something stupid that you don't remember the next day. But then you wake up with like frustration and animosity and you can't remember why. And so that like ended up really like having a damaging effect on my marriage. And I didn't really realize that until I was present and stopped drinking, how much better it got.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So see if I understand the idea right. So your idea is, and with this book, to try a 40-day fast from alcohol and just say, hey, I'm going to try and give it up for 40 days. And I want to see, how does my life change? How am I feeling? Is my life better? Do I really enjoy alcohol as much as I think I do when I look at all the consequences of it? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. And it's really about like this whole idea of Romans 12:2 of figuring out how you're conforming, if you're conforming to the world. And then also the Corinthians verse, right, of renewing your mind. So it's very much like diving deep into like the reasons that you drink and figuring out if they're true or not and holding these beliefs that we have. And like we said before we hit record, you can do this with anything. You can do this with food. You can do this with your phone, anything that you're feeling like it's distracting you or has maybe become an idol that's taking up too much time in your life. Figure out why you're doing it and go on an experiment to see if it's really doing those things for you while feeling better, while having your joy come back online, while finding this peace. I mean, when I was stuck in the great drinking cycle, it was constantly this game of like trying so desperately to moderate, right? Not drink too much. But what happens when you're trying to moderate is you're going head to head with a highly addictive substance that literally makes you want another drink. And anybody can get addicted to wine if you drink enough of it. And so you're kind of trying to play this like game with an outsmart a drug that can't be outsmarted. And so my point of saying all that is my clients and the gals that have read this book soon find out that there is this peace and there's this mental clarity when you don't have to play this like, am I going to drink tonight? I'm not going to drink tonight. I'll have one drink. Maybe I'll have two. We'll have a glass of water, or I need to drink on a full stomach, or I'm not going to drink till the weekend, right? Where your mind ends up becoming fixated on alcohol all the time. And it ends up taking up so much more space in our minds than we realize. And that's one of these things that going on a 40-day fast, you have to like experience it to really believe it and feel it. What it does for mental clarity is incredible.
Yeah. And you can't discount that craving because that's how it is for me with sugar. So if every day at 4:00, I had my favorite dessert and then maybe like another one, if I liked the first one, I would just be craving it all the time. And I'm sure it's like that with alcohol too, for people who have that temptation. And it feels so good to get rid of the craving. I think the only way to get rid of it is to either get rid of the substance altogether or somehow severely limit it. I don't know. You've decided, I'm sure a lot of people with alcohol would say, get rid of it altogether. And that's what you've chosen.
Yeah. And you hit on one of my favorite points, which is a whole chapter in the book that this is actually a choice. And that is what I really am excited to offer people, because I think when we talked about the stigma, right? It's like you have to drink and like keep it okay and like I'm talking to the people that are maybe struggling with this, right? Like you have to stick to 2 drinks and make it look okay and don't have any of the fallout, or you have to commit to being labeled an alcoholic, go to meetings for the rest of your life and never have fun again and be deprived. And like I'm offering like this middle ground of just try it and you get to make a choice. See if you feel better and make your decisions based on that.
And I love the way you're saying we're not trying it with brute force and willpower. you're exploring the whole time. You're exploring, what are you thinking? What are your reasons? So you're using that 40 days to really change your thinking so that your desires will change. And you even say, okay, what happens if on day 5 you break it? Then you use that, you call it a growth point.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you do have a series of alcohol-free days and then you have a drink, like what can we learn from that, right? Like what happened during the day? Was something really, really stressful that made you decide that that was what you needed? And did it help? And how did you sleep? And how did you feel the next morning? And did it really do the thing that you were drinking it for? And then hop back on day 6 and decide on day 6 how you want to feel and keep going. But it doesn't mean you have to go back to day 1. Let's figure out what you learned from that drink on day 5. And let's figure out like what lesson you can take from that in order to make a better decision if you want to going forward.
Yeah, I like that. And then all the little readings in the book, and you have a little exercise to do too. That's something that can kind of be your companion and help you. So each day of the fast, you can read one of the little one of the things that Christy wrote. I don't know what you call them, but
tiny tunas.
yeah. So read that, and then you'll be what you're putting in that book is helping people change their thinking. So anyway, It's a book I really loved. I could totally apply it with my relationship with sugar. And I just thought you had so many great ideas. So why don't you tell people where we can find you online, where we can find the book?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram pretty active at Love Life Sober with Christy. My website is lovelifesober.com. And you can also find the book at lovelifesober40dayfast.com. That's 40 day fast. And I also have a podcast called But Jesus Drank Wine and Other Stories That Kept Us Stuck.
Oh, that's good. That's great. So I'll include links to those in the show notes. And are you still doing sobriety coaching?
Yes, I am. I do one-on-ones. I do groups. I have different groups based on whether you want just connection, or if you want coaching. And so I have tons and tons of resources for that, for sure. And I should mention, I don't know when this is going to come out, but starting September 30th, I'm going to be coaching through the book starting September 30th in one of the communities. And so there's a link to join that on lovelifesober40dayfast.com.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So We'll put all those links in the show notes, lots of resources. I know I've just talked to more and more women who are struggling with this issue now, and I never used to get those emails before. So I think it's something people are starting to struggle with more and more.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that you have this great resources to help people.
Oh, thanks, Barb. I appreciate you.
Okay. And thank you for being on the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, all of you guys, for being here. I hope that this has been helpful, and I'll look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Christian Habits Podcast. If you'd like more help with stopping and starting habits, check out Barb's blog at www.barbraveling.com.